Hey there, I'm Michael, and in this video I'm going to share some tips that I've found helpful for managing emotions. If you haven't seen my other videos in this series, then check out the links in the description below. I think street epistemology in everyday life is quite different from what you typically see on YouTube and on the SE Discord server, because when we do SE in everyday life, we're typically exploring a belief that's relevant to a problem that we want to solve, like a decision that needs to be made or a conflict that we want to resolve that's on our mind right then and there in that moment. With SE on YouTube and Discord, people are typically asked to think of a belief to explore that's not necessarily on their mind right then and there. It's something that has to be fished out, so to speak, with a few questions, and I don't think that's representative of the vast majority of SE conversations happening out there. The variety of beliefs that can be explored in everyday life with SE is huge if you really think about it. I think what can make it difficult, though, with everyday life SE is that real life problems often involve a lot of real life emotion as well. And so with everyday life SE, I think it's especially important to be able to deal with and manage those emotions first. So my first tip is to try to notice that emotion might be an issue as early as possible. My second tip is to try to slow things down a bit in our conversation so we do have time to fully notice and hear the messages that are being sent to us, and so we can process them better. And try getting comfortable with pauses and silence at the end of sentences as well, because that can help both parties to fully hear and process what has just been said. All of this can be pretty hard to do, but just give it a go and see how it goes. So the next couple of tips that I found helpful come from a conversational approach known as nonviolent communication, or NVC for short. I'm just going to share a couple of pointers from NVC that I think are super helpful for leading into street epistemology conversations, but I'll leave a link in the description below to a free NVC online workshop for you to check out if you want to learn more about NVC. My third tip here is to start seeing people and yourself in terms of judgment-free observations, feelings, needs, and requests, instead of staying focused on the judgments, criticisms, or demands that you might be hearing. This can be really hard for a lot of us, especially when we're already triggered, since we're so used to thinking in terms of who's right and who's wrong, or who's going to win or lose, or they're bad and I'm good, and so on. But I am finding it easier to make that switch the more I try this approach. He talks too much is an example of a judgmental observation. He thinks he's the only one is also an example of a judgmental observation. There's a diagnosis there regarding his thoughts. In that meeting, he spent 20 minutes talking about his war stories, and the meeting went 20 minutes longer than scheduled. That's an example of a judgment-free observation. When we do this, we're helping to shift the focus away from judgments about the other person, which are less reliable and more prone to triggering defensiveness, and more towards something that we all fundamentally have in common, feelings and basic human needs. And we can relate better then to how and why we and other people are feeling and acting the way that we are when we do this. Just before I move on though, there is one caveat with MVC that I want to point out. We have to keep in mind that there will be times when it's just not going to be appropriate to go to those deeper levels that MVC take us to, because some people may feel really uncomfortable talking about their feelings and needs, and will only do so if they feel it's safe and feel that there's little risk of judgment or risk of triggering the other person when they express how they honestly feel. And sometimes the nature of the relationship is such that we just don't have permission to go there. So we have to be aware of that, look out for signs of that, and respect that. And sometimes in situations like that, I think just connecting with someone's thoughts first by showing that they are being heard can be a good thing to do. Ideally though, when I am able to be present and others are receptive, I want to use MVC first by getting permission to check in and talk about how they or I are feeling when I'm noticing defensiveness or negative emotion. This can be as simple as just jumping straight to tip number 7 and guessing how they're feeling and seeing if they engage with that. Or we can ask something like, can we talk about how you're feeling so I can understand that a bit better? Or can we talk about this a bit more to see if we can find a way to get all of our needs met? Okay, tip number 6, listen deeply and paraphrase back what you've heard them say, which simply involves summarizing back in your own words what you've heard them say. And by doing that, this can help you to correct any misunderstandings, and it also helps both you to process what has been said, and it shows others that you're generally trying to hear them. So once we've listened deeply and paraphrased back what we've heard, then we can try guessing how they are feeling and the universal core human needs that might be driving that using closed questions. A closed question is one that only requires a one-word answer like yes or no. With SE, we want to use broad, open what, why, and how type questions that can't be answered with just a one-word response to help people to reflect. But with NVC, we're dealing with emotions, and so closed questions to stay very focused on feelings and needs work best, like, are you feeling upset? Or are you feeling embarrassed? Or are you angry? Here's a list of common feelings that you can refer back to if you need to from time to time to help you when you first start practicing this skill. And don't worry about getting it wrong, because they'll correct you, and that's good because you now understand them better and have helped them to express how they are feeling, which helps them to get it off their chest, so to speak. Guessing needs might look a bit like this. Are you embarrassed because you value being accepted by your friends? Or are you angry because you value being able to trust your friends? And here's a list of universal core human needs. These are needs that anyone can relate to. We all have them in common, and you can refer back to this from time to time if you need to help you get better at this as well. So again, pause the video if you need to and get a screenshot of this. I also think that most people aren't really used to thinking about the difference between our core needs and our strategies for meeting our core needs, and so it can be easy to mix those up. I need you to give me peace and quiet is an example of a strategy, not a need. It's not a need because you can't say that anyone can relate to it. It brings this other person into it. It should leave them out of it. I need some peace and quiet is, on the other hand, a universal core need because everyone can relate to that. Again, the link to the full workshop is in the description below if you want to look into that further. Okay, so the next tip is to check to see if they do feel that they have been fully heard, and to make sure that they have said everything that they want to say. It's important to make sure that we have listened to the end of their words, plus more, because emotions need to be fully expressed. And it can be a big relief for someone to get that off their mind. And only once they have fully done that, they feel fully heard, then they might be ready to listen to you. And you then give both people a better chance of shifting to the right environment for rapport and honest reflection using SE to discover perhaps more reliable ways forward for meeting both of your needs. To do this check-in, you can try asking something like, is there anything else that you're feeling at the moment? Is there anything else you'd like me to hear right now? Or how do you feel now? Once someone feels fully heard, the next thing I found helpful is to try my best to share my own feelings and needs free of judgment and criticism. When I honestly express how I'm feeling because of the unmet need that I have in a way that's not critical of them, free of judgment, that leaves them out of it, I find that I'm also finding a way to connect through something that we both have in common. And there's a better chance, I think, of them being able to relate to my unmet universal need and to how I feel when I do that. Another principle of MVC is that once we're seeing each other in terms of feelings and needs, the solutions tend to find themselves. But how do we know that those solutions are reliable ones? You both might be feeling really good about the solution you've come up with, but that solution might not be a good one for you both in the end. Perhaps there is a better one that you could both discover together, and that's where I think SE complements NVC really well. So for me, I find that often a helpful thing to do next is to ask for permission to SE a solution together. It might look something like this. Can we try exploring together to see if we can find some good ways to get both of our needs met? And finally, tip number 11, don't do this. Don't educate or judge. Don't give advice or solutions. And don't reassure. Don't say you're okay or it's okay, it'll be fine, or at least this has happened, or look on the bright side, or anything like that. Because they are all your judgments, and feelings aren't necessarily logical, and you might be just arguing with their feelings when you do that, and that can make it worse. Just like with SE, NVC is a skill that can take time to develop, but I think they complement each other really well, and I think it's worth the effort. I hope you enjoyed this video. In the next one, I'll show some simple examples of how to do SE in everyday life. If you want to be notified of when that comes out and you haven't already done so, just hit the subscribe and notification buttons below. Take care, and thanks for watching.